with Scott Allen.
Hello, I am your host, Scott Allen, and this is Phronesis, Practical Wisdom for Leaders. If the topic is leadership, I'm in. I've spent more than 20 years in the field teaching, learning, writing, and questioning. When I'm not working on Phronesis, I travel, delivering keynotes, working with individuals and teams, and helping people from organizations across industries become better leaders. Want to learn more? Visit me at scottjallen.net. Phronesis offers a smart, fast-paced discussion about all things leadership. We explore relevant topics and incorporate practical tips to help you make a difference in how you lead and live. Listen Notes lists Phronesis in the top 3% of podcasts worldwide. Phronesis is the official podcast of the International Leadership Association. ILA brings together those who teach, study, and develop leadership, advancing leadership knowledge and practice for a better world. Learn more at ila-net.org. Finally, if you enjoy Phronesis, please subscribe to stay current on our weekly episodes. If you find an episode that resonates, please share it with your colleagues and friends. And if you want more content, subscribe to my newsletter, The Leader's Edge. The link is in the show notes. As always, thanks for listening. And now, here's today's show.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the Phronesis podcast. Thank you so much for checking in wherever you are in the world. I have 3 guests today. 1 returning. Dun, dun, dun. So, I have Denny Roberts, and he is an independent consultant, speaker, and author. His interest in leadership persisted throughout his 41-year career as a student affairs educator. He last served as Assistant Vice President of Education for the Qatar Foundation. During his 7 years with QF, he worked with Qatari and expatriate colleagues to create the student development and support services for its branch universities at Education City in Doha, Qatar. Prior to working abroad, he was Associate Vice President for Student Affairs at Miami University. He is past president of ACPA and a member of the International Leadership Association since its founding, essentially. And he's served on the board and done all kinds of incredible things there. He wrote a wonderful book, Deeper Learning in Leadership, and it's one that you should have on the bookshelf. I also have Julie Stark. She is the owner and managing director of the Stark Solution, a talent strategy, training design, and coaching firm located in Chicago, Illinois. She specializes in helping for-profit, nonprofit, and social enterprise teams connect strategic goals with vital performance development. Areas of expertise include consultative strategy, enterprise culture shift and learning roadmaps, facilitated needs assessment with multi-level leaders, end-to-end virtual in-person training design and deployment, and professional coaching for real-time performance growth. I also have Jessica Leving Siegel. She is an award-winning writer and communications consultant with expertise spanning the newspaper and magazine industry, the nonprofit sector, and the disability community. Before launching her creative agency, Sing Creative Group, she started as a journalist, writing for publications such as USA Today, the Boston Globe, the Jerusalem Post, and more. When she realized she wanted to use her storytelling skills to champion the causes she cared most about, she moved into the nonprofit world and spent 10 years working on internal comms teams for several organizations. Now she uses her expertise to help other changemakers hone their messaging and amplify their impact. She is also the author of 3 children's books, host of the Special Siblings podcast, and the founder of her own nonprofit organization, the Center for Siblings of People with Disabilities. In 2024, she mobilized the grassroots group Se Bienvenidos to coordinate a humanitarian response to Chicago's migrant crisis. Denny, you are the reason we are here. You have convened us today. So I'm going to turn it over to you, sir, and maybe you can share a little bit more about the work you all have been engaged in.
Thanks a lot, Scott. And thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to be a part of your podcast. This is actually a little bit of a commercial for us because we are presenting a conference immersion session that precedes the ILA conference in Chicago on November 7th. And if any ILA member is not signed up for it, you don't want to miss it because this is really going to be good. My interest in this comes from, as you said, I've been studying leadership for over 40 years, trying to understand how to empower leadership, how to make sure that all those that want to serve in leadership can do it and have the skills and abilities to really do well. I've become increasingly interested in the application of our theories to practice. So what happens when the rubber meets the road, and especially when it meets the road on a very difficult and contentious topic? I had a transformative experience last December. There was a message that went out from the village board of Wilmette, and Wilmette is a north suburb of Chicago. And the message said, Venezuelan refugees are arriving at the train station on practically a 3 or 4 times a day basis. And they're coming in flip-flops, shorts, and T-shirts. They need clothing. They need food. They need anything you could get. My wife and I ran to our closets and started dragging stuff out. We were delighted that when we went over to the train station, there was just mountains of things that had come out of people's closets instantaneously.
Wow.
And so we got interested because of that kind of just immediate and overflowing response. And so we started following it. And Diane decided to go to a meeting of the Bienvenidos that Jessica had formed and went there. 300 people showed up in, I believe, a gymnasium, if I'm correct. And it was pretty electrifying. And she came home and said, we got to do more on this. We got to work on it. She started being involved. And then I got intrigued with the idea of how on earth did this happen? How did we get in this pickle to start with? How do we get out of it? And how does a grassroots effort respond to a truly deep and difficult humanitarian issue? So I stumbled into Jessica and asked if she wanted to have a conversation. And that's where the idea of the ILA session came from. I'm just so proud to even know Jessica and Julie because they are true change makers in our community. And makes me proud to be a part of Wilmette and be a part of a humanitarian response to a deep need. So Jessica, what on earth caused you to be the one that jumped into the middle of this thing? And I think that you were called out, were you not? I mean, you didn't set out to necessarily do this. Am I correct?
Well, you know what, Denny, the same email that you received from the village of Wilmette, I also got. And I had already been somewhat involved as a volunteer. I had been very low key in my day job. I'm a consultant for nonprofits. I'm very connected to different community Facebook groups and nonprofit. So I was aware of this crisis that was going on, but it was in the city. I was really aware of all these people in need in Chicago, which is on a good day, a 30-minute drive from us. So I had been a little bit involved already with driving around. You know, I'd see in one group, oh, I've got a new mom that needs a car seat. And I'd see in another group, a Wilmette parents group, a mom saying, I've got a car seat. What should I do with it? How do I recycle a car seat? You're like, oh, I'll come get it from you and I'll bring it to you. And I had already kind of been doing that kind of thing on the side for months. And when I got that email from the village, it was really just a wake-up call of, wow, this is happening right here as well. And it also happened to coincide with a conversation I'd had with my husband about, are there ways I can use my skills a little more strategically, driving around to different suburbs, picking up car seats and microwaves and toaster ovens and somebody's extra, pound of apples. It's probably not the best use of my experience and skills. I had been in the back of my head thinking if there's something I can do to be a leader in a more efficient way. And I don't think I would have thought of myself as a leader at the time. I'm only using that terminology now that we've been talking about this leadership session for a month. But yeah, so when I saw the email, I just wrote back and I asked a couple, I wasn't really offering to help even. I just asked some clarifying questions because I was connected to all these other organizations. And one of them was the Nuevos Vecinos community and free store, which Julie, I think, had already been connected with at that time. Sure, we'll hear more about that when you speak, Julie. But I had been introduced to a lot of the leaders at this organization in the city serving newcomers and just asked, how is this getting organized? Where are the coats going? How are you distributing them? What's going to happen to the surplus? Can we also collect food? I'm under the impression that these people are coming after a several-day bus journey and not clear if they're getting food or not. And a lot of the word on the street is they're really hungry. So just asking for more details. And basically the next Monday, the city manager or the village manager of Wilmette called me and was like, hey, seems like you know a lot about this, so can you take it over? And basically what I discovered was they had been a little bit overwhelmed, I think, by Denny. What you described was this outpouring of support, which was so wonderful to see, but also caused some unforeseen logistical problems. There were probably 1,000 coats in the metro station in our tiny little suburb within 2 days of putting out the call. And that is a working metro station with trains coming by. And when I showed up to check out the situation, there were coats on the benches. Like, there was nowhere to sit if you were a commuter. It was just, they were everywhere. And our village didn't have resources allocated to deal with that. A bunch of other moms also volunteered, some of which I knew, and some kind of also independently had been like, what can we do to clean up this mess and get the train station in order? And as I met people and made connections, and really what started off as me just saying, oh, you should call Lisette, and oh, you should call Deborah, let's pull in these people, let's do this, sort of led to me realizing there are so many individuals and small groups that are interested in this issue and already working on it and already doing things, but nobody is coordinating them. And I didn't really set out to become the coordinator of them, but it was just what happened. And one thing led to another, and we ended up forming an organization.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a lot more, but I'm sure Julie should share too.
Yeah, Julie, how did you get connected in?
So it's funny to listen to I pull up the origin story, Jessica. Really, I had already been working, as you said, in the community, in the city. As folks were coming into the downtown station, I had worked for many years with refugees, those that have come here illegally through Catholic Charities and who are looking for sponsorship, and all that includes for years already. And when this situation arose, it was really very different. As Denny, you were saying, this was really on a level of 10,000 or more people coming into these communities, all different communities, and also from a legal perspective, a very different positioning. I had already been working in the city, actually with the very faith community that was galvanizing in one small sector of Uptown, which is a neighborhood here in Chicago. As I listened to you talk, Jessica, it's really, there's kind of two things going on. For me, it was a story unfolding. And that's what happens when you start a pathway to any leadership, any public leadership. There's the story unfolding, and you're watching it from the outside and looking in. I think even somebody who had been working with refugees for years from a sponsorship perspective, each new story that starts is its own story. So this story was happening, and I think first of all, I speak Spanish, and because a vast majority of these folks were Venezuelan, I felt like there was something that we could do just from going in there. And just as Jessica, you were talking, this personal boots on the ground response. We have a fair amount of abundance in certain parts of the city, and there is great need in certain parts of the city. And so it was a natural connection to start galvanizing all of those coats, as you said, Jessica, and everything else from baby wear to coats to sleepwear and even bedding. So all of that was what I would call is like the personal boots on the ground. Who are the foot soldiers? And there's so many foot soldiers that come out of the woodwork with great inclination to help and to serve, but not necessarily knowing how to be the catalyst for it. As Jessica said, where do we put this stuff? Yeah. So in the same way that Jessica came to, I can figure out how to make it a little more organized. I was doing the same thing with folks in the city, and I came to work in the Uptown neighborhood with what I would call structural leaders. So there's the foot soldiers that kind of plug into the unfolding story, and then there are the structural leaders who have the resources, as Jessica was saying, that have the legal services, the faith communities, offer the housing, do the English language learning. These are structures that exist, but to connect folks who are getting off buses, as you said, Jess and Denny, when they got off the bus and they have flip-flops and shorts, how do you connect them to all those structures? So a big part of what I have been doing is working with the folks who can connect them in the local communities. And that's the beauty of public leadership, is the way that people can connect into those networks of public support. And so that's the area that I've been working in so far.
Well, I love that phrasing, that the networks of public support, connecting into those networks of public support. It's beautifully said. Denny, where do you want to take the conversation now?
What I also discovered in getting acquainted with Julie and Jessica is that we're talking in positive terms, but this wasn't always easy. There was pushback and negative response too. And one of the things that I think is a real burden for a person in public leadership is just the fatigue of the work. Lots of times you didn't necessarily ask to do this, but all of a sudden you're in the middle of it and you're getting pushback, you're getting overburdened. Your day is becoming very long. And I'm curious, Julie and Jessica, how did that feel, and how long did it take you to realize that maybe you got in deeper than you thought you were going to?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. I definitely plunged in headfirst and quickly got in over my head. Yeah, I think the first few months I was just running on adrenaline. For the first few days, there's an excitement to it, and I think especially when it was just all kind of emails and the coats, and I hadn't actually met any newcomers face to face yet. It was just like, oh, the village manager called me and I'm going to be in charge of this city initiative. Cool. And running in, and so we got this imminent issue of coats everywhere and I had to call people to clean it. It was just this momentum. And then a few days after that, I happened to be at the metro station. We were sorting all the donations and trying to get everything organized and work on a distribution system. And I happened to be there when a bus came. And these buses were unannounced, on no schedule. I didn't know that it would be there. And just all of a sudden, the bus pulled up and about 50 people are getting off the bus and coming in. And they had gotten there about 10 minutes before the train that they were being told to take. And a lot of people, and I certainly before this, didn't understand what it's really like on the ground when these buses are showing up. They come on the bus from Texas. They drive straight through. There's two drivers that take turns, and they've got what's called a handler on the bus with them, whose jobs, as sent from Texas, is to basically keep the group in line. And they time the buses to arrive at the station about 10 minutes before the metro train that's then going to take them from Wilmette into Chicago, because the real welcome center where they need to get paperwork, get connected to city, like plug into that network Julie was talking about, that's all in Chicago. That doesn't exist in Wilmette, and a little bit more now, but certainly not then. So these people have been told, get off the bus, go straight to the platform and get on the next train in 10 minutes. And all of a sudden, there were like 6 of us moms there, and most of us did not speak Spanish. I think there was one person who had like high school Spanish, and we've all learned the word abrigos is coats, and we're just all of a sudden like, abrigos, we're like yelling and shouting, and we just start dumping the boxes of donations on the ground so that it was just a free-for-all kind of frenzy of people grabbing these coats, because like Denny said, it's 17 degrees outside and they're in shorts and flip-flops. They're freezing cold. And I just was so struck. There were a ton of kids. And I think some people picture that this is like young men coming, and certainly there are, but it's primarily young men and their families, young men with their wives, with their young children. And that busload was all families. There were a lot of little kids. And there was this one girl who was maybe 5 years old, and her parents had run over to go try and find coats in their sizes. And she was just standing there crying, and she was just kind of wailing outside, freezing cold. And she's wearing tank top shorts and Crocs. And, I walked over and threw a coat over her that was way too big, just the first one I saw, and draped it over. But I don't speak Spanish. I'm trying to comfort her, but I don't speak her language. And I just had this feeling of FEMA needs to be here. Like, this is unlike anything I've ever experienced. And I've been involved with nonprofits and service my whole life, but never like emergency response, like what this feels like. And I think that image of that girl and of all those people getting off the bus, really, to your question, Denny, there was no question for weeks after that 24/7, my focus was like, we got to get resources to these people. We've got to help them. We've got to make sure they get situated. We've got to make sure that we help in the biggest way we can. And it was just also this kind of wild experience of everything I asked, people were saying yes. Like, I was reaching out to church groups and synagogue groups and all the nonprofits that I am connected with in the area that could have been helpful. And all of them were like, yes, absolutely, we'll help. And it was both, as they say, a blessing and a curse, in that it was so wonderful to have the generosity and resources. And suddenly, in addition to my day job and parenting my own toddler, I've got 45 people to call back for an urgent thing. There's a lot I could go over, but one thing led to another. We ended up having a really large fundraising gala in April, because through Louise said, this incredible woman who runs Nuevos Vecinos, the organization that Julie was mentioning, they had this very innovative housing program that they were working on. And maybe we can talk about it more later if it's relevant, but they needed to raise tens of thousands of dollars to make it happen. And I was like, hey, I've run nonprofit gals before. Let's do it. And kind of had this crazy idea, like, yeah, we can raise $40,000 by April. And we did. And that momentum really carried me through. And then the week after the gala, I was just like, I can't get out of bed. I think I was just running on fumes. And by the first week of May, I just stopped answering emails for a couple of days. I don't know what has happened to me the past 4 months of my life, but I do need to check back in with my own work and maybe spend some time with my toddler, my husband, So it was then kind of this process of figuring out like, all right, what can we do to be sustainable, and figuring out how to delegate and create systems and try to create a way for this work to be sustained without me having a full-time unpaid job.
Wow.
I think that because of the professional work that I do in training and development, I'm always thinking about what are we learning here? And as I'm listening to talk, Jessica, it's like this constant learning curve on the giving curve. And what you're describing there is this fatigue and this sense of who can do what. And as the story's unfolding, and at least for me, I started to see very clearly that there were, the word that's coming to mind, it's a weird word, but titrations of what people can give. So some people are boots on the ground. They will get in their car. They will carry things to and from and to and from. Other people are, I can make calls. And other people are, all I'm going to do is bring the goods. I can bring the goods, but I'm not going to go down there. And then there are other people who are like, give me a project from day 1 to day 5. I will be all in and then I'm out. So when you start to see those different titrations of give, then you can start offloading a little bit of all of that you would normally just be taking on. And I think something that you said, Jessica, that's really cool is that there is no shortage of people's desire to give. It was really incredible. That's why when Denny was talking about, why don't we talk about public leadership? I was thinking to myself, who's a leader? A leader is anyone really who stands in and says, I'll do that part. And can kind of in the public space for sure, because it's a very egalitarian, it's not hierarchical in the public leadership. If there's a need and people are willing to stand in, it just requires somebody to say, okay, you do that part, you do the food part, you're doing cooking. And even that can be shared. So what I learned over time, and by the way, not great at it yet, but getting better at it, is to really figure out how people can give in the way and in the spirit that they want to give. That's how I was dealing with fatigue. One quick story is when there was a medical need. That's a good example of there's, I think, 12 to 17 shelters in Chicago to house all these 35,000 people. There was a need for medicine. They don't belong to any hospital. There are no doctors there. And there was a group of Rush medical students who created a medical mobile unit. So to me, that was the perfect example of the busy students, their med students. All they needed to do was gather up their at their hand medication, simple stuff like stuff for fevers, and take them to these shelters. And that's exactly what they did. And it was just for the winter. They went in, they did it, and they went out. And so that was what they could contribute. So that's what I mean by people who have the right spirit and the capacity to do it in the way that they do.
I almost have this metaphor of a conductor and Denny, you are passionate of the orchestra. That's its passion of yours. But the individual who can connect to resources, the individual who can connect individuals with a certain skill set, the individual who can discern what can you give right now, and then I'm going to place you. You're almost a hub that so much is going through, and part of the work feels like it's conducting.
Yeah, I think it actually had a lot of parallels to me. And I think maybe briefly, Julie and I spoke about this because I know it's very much in your professional realm. I run my own business. I'm about 5 years into it. And it's very similar to where I am as a manager, and learning how to delegate and learning how to ask for help and learning how to put people in the right roles, learning how to step out of the roles I shouldn't be in. And luckily, I'm very fortunate to have had support and continue to have support in figuring out how to do that. And I think partly because I have already been in the midst of going through learning how to delegate in my business, I think that's probably the only reason that any of the work I started is still going, because there was definitely, after the gala, I was like, I'm done. I got to throw in the towel. What am I doing to myself here? And, and Julie and I have spoken about, there are we've seen at this point the wave of people that they rise up, they make a tremendous contribution, and then they burn out, they're gone. And the only reason that didn't happen for me is because after I caught up a little bit on sleep, I was able to be reminded of some of my learnings is, okay, I'm going to turn to the other people that have been involved. I'm going to ask for help. I'm going to ask who is willing to take some other stuff on. I'm going to let people know that I've got to set some boundaries. And people did step up, and it was very hard. I'm not saying it was easy. It was very difficult to see what had been for 4 months this baby I had created, and did not get carried forward the way I would have done it, but had to remind myself it's still happening and I don't have to be the one doing it. And that's enough.
Denny, this has been a wonderful primer into the dialogue that you all will be sharing at the ILA conference in this pre-conference session. It sounds just absolutely fascinating. I am making a ton of connections to the leadership literature in my head, whether that's servant leadership. we could just go down the list. Denny, anything you want to say as we begin to wind down our time about the time that we'll be together in November, what you're hoping for that pre-conference session?
Knowing how effective Phronesis is in reaching people, I expect that people are running to their computers right now to sign up for this pre-conference immersion session. The really cool thing that's happening also is that Julie and Jessica are inviting other community members who are not ILA members, but they're a part of this larger network that they've been working with. So literally, ILA participants have the opportunity to get in the streets. They can understand Chicago, and I really don't even understand why somebody would come to Chicago without having an immersion experience like this. It's just terrific. And so I hope that they will sign up. And I hope that also the lesson that is learned here in Chicago is generalized to places around the world. Other countries are struggling with this. Other areas within the United States are struggling with this. And migration of people across borders is not going away. It's been happening for millennia. It's been happening all over the world. It's just that America has not been that affected by it. And all of a sudden, it's a hot topic. And now people are talking. And we need to figure out ways to get through it positively, which I think is the credit to Jessica and Julie, that they jumped in and made it something that was manageable.
You all are doing God's work, whatever that means to you, not putting any version on you. It could that you're earning karma points, or the universe is smiling, however we want to say it. You're earning points and you're doing good in the world and making the world a better place. And I will put all kinds of links in the show notes and ensure that everyone has access to get involved and to sign up for this session so that, again, Denny, as you said, beautifully, you're in Chicago, this is real, and these are individuals in the community working to make a difference. And I think there's just a lot of leadership lessons embedded in there. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. I always wind down the episode and maybe just in a couple breaths, what's something that's caught your attention recently? Maybe something you're listening to, something you're reading, something you're streaming, but is there something that the listeners might be interested in? Denny, maybe we'll start with you.
Oh, wow. I can't remember the title of the book that I'm reading right now. It was given to my daughter by a friend of hers, and it's a wonderful exploration of how we can get over the partisanship in our country. And be able to start to talk with one another across our different perspectives. And we've got to learn this.
Send me the link. I'll put it in the show notes. Thank you. That's awesome. Julie.
Probably one of the best books I read last year was How to Know a Person by David Brooks.
Oh, wow.
And I think it's about really listening and really being present and what that feels like and sounds like. And I think it serves in every aspect of my life, really. I think about that book all the time. So that would be the latest book that kind of has infused my thinking about the way we're present with people.
Oh, I love it. I will put that link in the show notes. I had not heard of that one. Okay. Jessica, what do you got?
I think probably the most impactful book, certainly in regard to what we've talked about here today, is I read the book 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. And I can't remember at what point I read it, if it was before or in the midst or after all of this craziness that I got into, but really about 4,000 weeks is the average number of weeks. If you live to be whatever the average lifespan is, 80 years old or whatever, that's how many weeks you're alive. And it's about time management. I think the subhead is like time management for mortals or something like that. And it's more of an existential time management book about kind of accepting that you can't do everything. You will never get to everything on your to-do list. You can't see through every idea that you have, but really intentionally choosing where you are going to focus your time and how you are going to spend your 4,000 weeks. And that's something I think about almost every day when I have a new idea for something I want to pursue and have to tell myself, prioritize, stay focused.
4,000 weeks. Okay. Wonderful. I will put that in the show notes. To the three of you, thank you so much for all you're doing. Excited to see you in November. And for listeners, you know what to do. All kinds of links in the show notes. As always, thanks for checking in. Take care, you all. Be well.
As I mentioned in that episode, so many leadership lessons, so many connections that can be made, but just love propping up a story of some individuals in a community trying to make a difference and benefit other humans. And I think it's really, really important. And as Denny said, he's really trying to explore how we got here, how we move forward. And obviously, issues like immigration in the United States are these complex adaptive challenges that we have struggled with for decades. And as Denny said, it's happening all over the world. And how do we do that work well? So I hope you gleaned a lot from that story. 3 individuals making a difference and trying to improve their communities. To each of you, thank you so much. The practical wisdom for me is make a difference. Take care, everyone. Be well. Bye-bye. You have just finished another episode of Practical Wisdom for Leaders with Scott Allen. To contact me, visit scottjallen.net or send me a note at scott@scottjallen.net. I'm also on LinkedIn, so let's connect. If you have feedback, I'd love to hear it. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And now here's my daughter, Emily, with the outro.
You've been listening to Phronesis, Practical Wisdom with Scott Allen.